Hi, and welcome to another video from the CTAD Clinic. My name's Dr. Mike Lloyd and I'm the clinic director. In the video this time, we're going to be looking at a concept called betrayal trauma. This is something that I mentioned before when I attended a ESTD conference a couple of years ago. And I thought it would be useful to come back to this, and a couple of people have asked me to. So I thought it would be a really useful thing to do to revisit betrayal trauma and come back and look a little bit more about the concepts of what it is and actually the longer term impact of this, because this is something that many people with dissociation and complex trauma in childhood are likely to have experienced in one form or another. And it's going to be useful to sort of have a look at what the longer term impacts are and actually what the benefits are of working through therapeutically to try and undo the damage that can be caused by something like betrayal trauma. So betrayal trauma is something that was initially sort of like put together as a term by Jennifer Freyd in 1991. And realistically, this is what it means: where the betrayed person needs to maintain a relationship with the betrayer for support or protection. The key here is that this is about a relationship between two people or multiple people where there is a sense of betrayal in that relationship. So that means that the person is doing something which is harmful or is inappropriate or is doing something which is damaging to that relationship in the context of the bond that should be taking place. So a good example would be the relationship between a parent and a child, where the parent is betraying the child by not protecting them, not loving them, not nurturing them, not providing them with the environment and the context in which to flourish. An adult relationship could be, let's say, an intimate relationship with two people where one person is cheating or is hitting or is stealing or is doing something to the other person that is considered to be harmful. Now, the betrayal comes in because that's not what they should be doing. Now, under lots of circumstances, you may think, well, okay, why don't you just leave the relationship and walk away? And it's often not simple. Firstly, a child couldn't leave that relationship. And in adult terms, many people don't leave those relationships no matter what kind of behavior is coming towards them, because they need to be in that relationship. And this is where the problem occurs, because it's not as simple as saying, right, you're treating me badly, so I'm going to leave. The problem occurs when there's a need to remain for safety, security, finance, shelter, all of the various different things, care, whatever it might be. So there is a reliance or a dependence on the other person. Now that should be reciprocated with kindness and generosity and gentleness and compassion, is in a loving relationship, parent to child, or two people, or just partners in general. But it's being betrayed because that love, that responsibility that should take place in that relationship to be equal is not taking place. So that person is using or hurting or harming the person they're in a relationship with, and therefore are betraying the code, if you like, of what a good relationship should look like. And the difficulty is that in childhood, if a child has this going on, if they have a parent that's betraying them by hurting them, harming them, not protecting them, all of those things, they have to remain. So in a way, they see the betrayal, they can feel it because it's unpleasant and it's hostile and it's affecting them, but they're not able to do anything about it. So what happens is that betrayal becomes buried. And in a way, the person, that, let's say the child, has to become blind to the betrayal, has to not see it. Because if they see it, then they're becoming increasingly harmed. And obviously that's pretty traumatic. If every day you're being harmed, this is what we consider to be the complex trauma. So in order to survive that relationship, in order to not be kind of like dismantled or broken by that relationship, the child needs to dissociate it out. It needs to become blind, to not see it, to not recognize it, to make it as if it's simply not there. And that allows the child to survive in that relationship and do as well as they can do, considering the context. Now, we can see that those children are likely then to grow up into be the sort of adults who maintain that behaviour, because a behaviour learned early in childhood tends, not always, but tends to be repeated in adult life, which means a lot of those children are growing up into adults that are going into relationships that have betrayal built in and are not leaving them because they're not really seeing the importance of the betrayal. They don't really understand how painful and how difficult this is because they've become used to it over so many years in their childhood. It's like it becomes normal for them to be treated like this in relationships. So therefore all relationships are like this. So therefore when a relationship is awful and is terrible and is harmful, let's say the person is beating, is hitting, or is cheating, or is stealing, and all of those sort of things, it's not being seen. The degree of significance is not being felt. So the buried trauma then remains buried, and then these go into repetitive relationships. And people have said to me in my clinical practice, why does this keep happening to me? Why is it that every relationship I get into, I get cheated on, they steal from me, they treat me badly, they insult me, they criticize me, they break me off from my friends and my family, and generally every relationship is just awful, awful, awful. And this is one of those things that we can go back to and try and understand whether they're actually suffering from a betrayal trauma from early childhood. Because if they are, there's something that can be done about it. And this is about really understanding the red flags in relationships. It's like you were treated poorly by your parent, therefore you might be being treated poorly by other adults in your life when you grow up, and you do not have to accept this. You can start understanding what the red flags of damaging, dangerous, aggressive, coercively controlling relationships might be, i.e. all abusive relationships, and be able to either not get in them in the first place, to see them coming and say absolutely not, or to realize that you're in those relationships and either start changing the nature of the relationship or be able to leave it with support and resources. So the effects of betrayal trauma can last a lifetime, and many people have been in poor relationships, abusive relationships for decades because they've not really understood how harmful that relationship is, because they can't see it. And on the outside, other folks are looking and going, why aren't you leaving? Why don't you leave? This is obviously a terrible relationship, but the person in the relationship simply cannot see it. It's not that they realize it and they think, oh, I just can't be bothered to get out. They often don't see how difficult and dangerous that relationship is. Those red flags are being flown all over the place to other people, and it's like they're colorblind to the color red, and they're just not seeing what's going on in that relationship. And the long-term effects of betrayal trauma are myriad. So they can bring about obviously difficulties in mood, so depression, anxiety, obviously PTSD, those kind of things can take place. They can have somatic symptoms, so people can end up with lots and lots of physical, sensory difficulties as a result of staying in awful relationships for many, many years. And this includes parental relationships growing up. So children that have become adults maintain their relationships and attachments with abusive parents and caregivers and grandparents, and those can continue being abusive for many, many years. So those kind of relationships also cause enormous amounts of stress, and those stresses can lead to physical difficulties as the person just goes through the years of their life. Can lead to memory difficulties, can lead to dissociation, to detachment. Generally, you know, the absolute negative sense of self-worth and self-value, that people simply have zero self-esteem in these relationships, and that allows them to be easy prey for folks that want to treat them horribly and not be left. So the betrayed, traumatized person often ends up in relationships with people that are looking to hurt and cause harm in relationships through their own purposes and their own means and whatever those might be. So again, this isn't something that is guaranteed to happen, and lots of people come out of those, see it, and then maintain really wonderful relationships. The difficulty is when the betrayal trauma is present and is not seen. That can have long-term lasting effects that can be turned around using therapeutic processes, using all the various techniques of understanding attachment theory and understanding the nature of relationships, being able to build safe, consistent, reliable and good boundaries in those relationships often makes a huge difference to people. And this is something that can take place within therapy. So this is what we wanted to look at. It's the betrayal trauma. That's pretty obvious. You know, you get hurt by somebody and you either get out of that relationship or you maintain that relationship and you stay in it because you need to stay in it. And then the longer you stay in it, the less you see of the betrayal, and that betrayal gets buried deep into the layers, and that has catastrophic effects for relationships, attachments and sense of self later on in life. And by uncovering and processing that betrayal trauma, it allows a person to understand the boundaries and the red flags and then move towards much healthier and better relationships later in life. So it's quite a simple concept, but it's really easy to see how powerful it can be, and if left completely undetected and therefore nothing is being done with it, it can be catastrophic for many, many years. So again, I hope this has been a helpful video. It'd be really useful to look at the comments and just see what people think of this, because I am revisiting something that I came to probably about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago. So I hope this has answered some of the questions that people have been asking of me since then. And please keep all the comments and do the usual things, liking and subscribing. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And until that time, please do take great care.